This is unnecessary, entirely unnecessary. This ain't it. This ain't it. Hello and welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and today we are going to be doing a February wrap up of everything that I read in the month of February. It was a lot. I think I read like 22 books, which is embarrassing. And before you say like, Ashley, do you have no life? No, I don't have a life. You can save that question and just come into this knowing I don't have a life. Without further ado, let's get into my February Wrapped and I hope you enjoy. The first book that I read this month that I really thought was going to be a 5-star read for me, I was a little bit disappointed, was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I really hyped this book up in my head. I really thought that this was going to be a 5-star read for me. It has a witchy main character, it has cozy elements, it has found family, has a little bit of romance, and I did like the book, so don't misinterpret, but I only gave it like 3.5 stars. And I felt really guilty doing that. But I feel like it just wasn't for me. And maybe that was because I hyped it up in my head so much ahead of time. So while the writing style was really great, I really liked the story. I liked the magical elements. I really liked the found family. And I particularly liked the message that was sent throughout the book as well. And I think overall, a very positive reading experience for me. I just think I expected a little bit more, I don't know, excitement or a little bit more adventure, I guess. So I would give this definitely a solid 3.5 stars. I was a little bit disappointed, I'm not gonna lie. So I did pick this up because it's cozy, because it's fantasy, because it's witchy, and because there are also romance elements in it. And part of my February challenge was to read more romance books. So didn't start out super strong, but there's always the next one. So the next book that I read in February, I stuck true to my agreement to read more graphic novels, and I actually picked up Sheets by Brenna Thumler. I think that's how you say her last name, Thumler. I loved this book. I thought this was so fun. I thought it was really cute. I loved the main character. We're following I think she's a 13-year-old girl who is responsible for running her family's laundromat, which is not a typical duty for an average 13-year-old girl. So we already know that we have this character who has some responsibilities that maybe other people in her age group don't typically have. Also have a ghost character as well, which I thought was super adorable. The ghost stumbles upon the laundromat, ends up haunting the laundromat, if you will. And I just thought it was a really cute story, all in all. I give it about, I would say 4 stars. I read it in one sitting, which is super impressive for me. The other thing I wanted to mention was I really enjoyed that it was in like a full or pretty close to full color type art style. I don't necessarily love when a graphic novel is just like black and white or two-toned, so like a teal and a white or a blue and a white. But what I did like about this story is the ghosty scenes are all done in like a two-tone kind of black and white style. So it's kind of like a greenish blue and a white. And I just like that. I think it's really appropriate for the ghost story to be in this art style and in this color, to be in this color. But I really like that the rest of the story has a lot of color and it's very, very vibrant. I found myself getting lost in the photos on the page. So when I finished reading, I actually went back and I just spent time looking at the photos. I thought that was a really fun time too. So the artist and the author is Brenna Thumler, and I did find out that she also illustrated the graphic novel of Anne of Green Gables, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And I thought that was funny because on page 11, you can actually see she is looking in the library and she is looking at a book of Anne of Green Gables. So I thought that was a really cute Easter egg and I really appreciated that. So I definitely am going to read the next book in this series. I have it right on my bookshelf. I have Delicates, and I think there's a third book called Lights. So I will be ordering that off Amazon as well. Big fan of this series, super recommend it, and I thought it was a really good time. So this next book, I told you I was gonna do it. I told you I was gonna jump in. I fell in love with Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. So naturally, I read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. It was an appropriate Valentine's Day read, very romantic. I loved this book. I did only give it a 4-star and I thought I would give it a 5-star. And the only reason I gave it a 4-star is I felt like probably from about here to here is like this massive, it's a lot throughout the book, but I would say like this much could go away from the miscommunication trope and the story would have been just a little bit better. Don't love the miscommunication trope, and I don't love when it is run into the ground. And that's the only complaint I have about this book, is I think the miscommunication trope went on about maybe 20 to 40 pages too long. Other than that, it was a really great story. I loved the representation of a partner with generalized anxiety disorder. I loved the conversation about some of the ways that a partner might have to show up for their significant other in the event that they have anxiety. So I really liked that message. I liked the idea we have this male main character who has some vulnerabilities, and we also have this female main character who is, I don't want to say responsible because that's not the right word, who is willing and who is able to give our main male character the little bit of additional support, the little bit of additional comfort and attention possibly that he might need to feel safe, to feel seen. As somebody with generalized anxiety disorder, that is huge. If you can find a partner who understands that maybe you need to have a rundown of how many places there are to park and what the menu looks like and what the seating situation looks like and what the capacity of the restaurant is. Maybe you have a partner like that. Maybe you are a partner like that. I really appreciated the representation in this book. I thought it was wonderful. And I am absolutely in love with Brianna. We all need a person in our lives like Brianna. So big fan. I thought the story was wonderful. I love the vulnerability. And I love the topics discussed in this book. Could have done without a little bit of the miscommunication. So 4 stars for sure. I don't know if she's going to write another book in this series. I should probably look and find out. I'll read it. I'll read it for sure. I'm into it. I am an Abby Jimenez stan. So the next book that I read this month, I finished really early on in the month because I started reading it at the end of January. House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. So let's get the initial review out of the way. I thought this was okay. I didn't think it was amazing. I don't love the Crescent City series though. I think it's mediocre. Ranking the series from first to last, Throne of Glass is the best, ACOTAR is second, and that's saying something because I did not like ACOTAR all that much, and then Crescent City. So this is my least favorite Sarah J. Maas series by a long shot. Part of that comes from the fact that all of the books are almost 800 pages or more, and they are filled with so much stuff. Sometimes the stuff just feels like it's there just to be there. Like, it doesn't make any sense as to why it's there. So the initial rating that I gave this book was 4 stars. And I'll tell you why. I cried a couple times. Not a crazy amount, but I did cry a couple times, and I did feel a little bit emotional throughout this book. But I also felt like this book could have been so much better. So upon review of my 4-star review, I'm going to downgrade it to a 3-star, which is what I gave the rest of the Crescent City novels. I have given them all 3-star. I think they are entertaining. I think that they are by an author that I like. What I will say is I feel like Miss Sarah Janet needs to be edited. Like, I've heard these things that she doesn't have an editor, that she just gets to publish like whatever she wants. There's no reason for this book to be 835 pages long. Straight up. And I love big books. I like big books and I cannot lie, right? This is unnecessary, entirely unnecessary. It was a entertaining book. It did not go the way I anticipated it to. I was shocked. I felt like if we were getting the crossover that we all thought we were getting, we would have gotten different characters from that universe, namely the main freaking characters, possibly. For starters, I don't know. I also was not in A Court of Silver Flames stan. Didn't love that book. Out of all the A Court of Thorns and Roses books, that was my least favorite. So the fact that it was characters from my least favorite book in the ACOTAR series, which until the Crescent City series was my least favorite Sarah Maas series, I don't know. I don't want to ramble on about this book. It's too big to even begin to break it down. So let's just talk about the fact that it is huge. It's by an author who will get to publish whatever she wants, whenever she wants, for the rest of all of her existence. And I guess good job for her. That's amazing. But it is wholly unnecessary for this book to be this big. So 3 stars. That is the most you're going to get out of me, Sarah Janet. I am sorry. I am going to go back and I'm going to finish my Throne of Glass series now and know that I am truly reading the best of the best Sarah J. Maas series, because this ain't it. This book is about 2 people that are
high school, I don't even want to say high school sweethearts, because really they hooked up for like 1 week in high school, and it was amazing and awesome. And they talk about this throughout the book of how they just kind of felt like they knew each other quite instantly. Like they had this instant connection. However, they're high schoolers, they're dumb. Things happen, they break trust, and they go their separate ways. And as they get older, they both find themselves in careers as authors. Eva is a single mom. She is a best-selling erotica writer, and Shane is a reclusive, award-winning novelist. Shows up in New York, where Eva is actually on a panel about her writing and about her books. And one thing I like about this is she really does seem to discount Eva, our main character. She really seems to discount her writing because it is fantasy and it's romance, and there's wolves and there's fairies and there's vampires, and she's kind of discounts her own writing because she's comparing it to the writing of those like Shane, who are writing literary fiction and who are winning awards for their work. One thing I appreciate is that it's talked about in this book that Eva's work is valuable, and she's actually commended for writing these fantasy and these romance novels because it allows her characters to exist in an unproblematic environment where people can read these books, her books, and escape and really enjoy themselves through her work. And so anyway, getting off topic a little bit, but I just thought that was a really nice kind of thing mentioned in this book. Eva and Shane end up running into each other again at this literary event in New York. It turns out that Shane is like a massive fan of her work, which she's very surprised about. He is an NAACP award-winning author. He is well known for his literary fiction. So she's quite surprised when he stands up talking about her writing and seems to know every single thing, all of the characters, all of the nuances, everything within her books. And it kind of turns out he might be her biggest fan. And the story is really about them reconnecting, but also how they have spent the last, I don't know, 20 years of their adult lives writing to each other through their works. And it is just, this is such a great book. This was, I don't even know how to describe it. I didn't have any complaints. I didn't feel like there was any trope that was overly done. I didn't feel like there was any part of the book that really annoyed me. All in all, I thought that this did a really good job of talking about generational family trauma. This did a really good job talking about sobriety and substance abuse. This did a really good job talking about chronic illness and talking about what we might call invisible illnesses that people struggle with. And this did a really good job talking about what it's like to be a single mom or have been raised by a single mom. And I also particularly love Shane's story of how he hasn't written a word since going sober. I think this is an issue that a lot of people face. I am almost 1 year sober from alcohol, and I think that as an author, if everything I had ever written and been awarded for and recognized for had been written while I was under the influence, I would also feel like I didn't know the English language and I didn't know how to write sober. So I love that that's discussed in this book. And I particularly like that because Shane is not writing, he's actually working at a university and also volunteering his time at local high schools for at-risk youth. 5 stars. Cannot recommend this book enough. I will certainly be reading this again and recommending it to literally anyone who will listen. So highly recommend 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. The next book that I read this month was The Quiet Tenant by Clemence Michalin. This was a really interesting way of telling a story. So this is about a serial killer named Aiden Thomas, who is a hardworking family man and a beloved figure in the small upstate New York town where he lives. And we know that Aiden is a serial killer, and the quiet tenant knows that Aiden is a serial killer. But I really particularly liked that this story was told from the perspective of the women in Aiden Thomas's life. So this is told from the quiet tenant, which I don't want to give anything else away, but the perspective of the quiet tenant. This is told from the perspective of his victims post-mortem. And this is told from the perspective of his daughter, who he is now raising as a single father. I gave this book 4 stars. So the reason I gave this book 4 stars was I did feel like the ending was underwhelming. And I am a huge Brad Thor fan. Little tidbit on the back of the book here by Brad Thor. The book is that good and the ending is killer. So I I took Brad's word for that, and I really expected the ending to be killer, and it wasn't. It wasn't terrible, but it was underwhelming. Like when you read the ending is going to be killer, you expect it to be freaking killer. Maybe that's just me. So Brad lied, but that's okay. Overall, very good book. I highly recommend, and I'm glad I picked this up. I happened to find it at my local library, and I've seen all of the booktubies. The booktube girlies, but I don't want to say that because there's like booktube guys too, who I really enjoy. The booktubies. I'm gonna call them booktubies. The booktubies recommended this, so I listened, and I'm really glad that I did. So 4 stars, highly recommend. The next book that I read this month was super enjoyable. I had a heck of a time. I actually listened to the audiobook. Highly recommend doing that. There are 2 voice actors that play the male and female characters. So the book that I am referring to is Butcher and the Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This is a love story, if you will, a dark romance about 2 serial killers who kill bad guys. So they're kind of like on their Dexter Morgan shit, if you will, and they find each other. They run into each other. I don't want to give away how they run into each other, but it happens like real early on in the book. And they're basically kind of just like, oh, hey, you're so-and-so and you're so-and-so. And yeah, I love your work and you're so good at your job. Do you want to like, I don't know, have a competition once a year and see if we can like kill bad guys and see who can do a better job? And so that kind of sets up the premise of the book. We have our 2 main characters. We have Rowan and we have Sloane, and they are once a year meeting up for this annual game where they are being assigned a target and they're having to track down the target, and whoever can kill him first or her first wins. And it ends up being a really interesting story. I really liked it overall. I don't think it was amazing writing by any means, but I didn't expect it to be either. I didn't go into this expecting like literary fiction. I went into this expecting a good time, and that's what I got. So I'm going to give this a 4 stars. I really liked the characters of this book. I really liked Rowan. I thought Rowan was an awesome male main character. Smut scenes in this book are pretty intense. I'm not complaining about it. I liked it. I actually liked the language used in this book in the smut scenes a lot better than some authors do, particularly looking at you, Sarah J. Maas, and your use of the word entrance. I hate it. Overall, I thought it was a really good experience and kind of perfect for my February month of love and serial killers, which kind of seem to be a little bit of my vibe so far. So we'll see if that changes. We are actually only at February 12th. There's still time to change the trajectory. But as of right now, I'm reading a lot of romance and I'm reading a lot of like serial killer stuff. So it's been a good month. So the next book that I read is actually book number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a series. So I am officially getting ready to start the 6th book in this series, and that is A Murderous Relation by Deanna Raybourn, which is the 6th book. Now I have to count again. The 5th book in the Veronica Speedwell series. This was a great book, of course. I absolutely love Stoker and Veronica. You are going to get sick of me saying that and be excited for me to finish this series. But I gave this book only a 4 star. And I think this is the first Deanna Raybourn book that I've given a 4 star to. It wasn't my favorite, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I read it off the tail end of I think I read it off the tail end of Crescent City 3. So I was still kind of wrapped up in that 835-page chonker. So maybe I just need to give it another read. Maybe I wasn't fully invested. But so far, this is my least favorite in the series, which shocks me. Completely shocks me. It will not stop me from going on to book number 6, 7, and 8, and hopefully 9 soon. But yeah, this was my least favorite Veronica Speedwell so far, which really surprised me. So maybe I need to go back and do another read through, but it won't be this month. So I definitely will be picking up the next book in the series. Next month, I am trying to pace myself with series that I'm actively in by doing 1 book in a series a month. So next month will be the next book in the series. I might go a little bit quicker with the Veronica Speedwell books only because there is another one coming out this year, and I want to make sure I'm caught up and ready to go when that comes out. I decided to jump into book 4. I have to do the math on this every single time. Like one of these days, I will remember it. Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas, a Throne of Glass novel, book number 4 officially. This is my 5th Throne of Glass novel in the order that I am reading them. So I read books 1, 2, Then I read the prequel. Then I read books 3 and 4. And this is by far my favorite Sarah J. Maas book so far. I am obsessed with this book. Start to finish, I was enthralled. I read it in like 3 days, which for me to read like 635 pages of Sarah J. Maas after reading 835 pages of Sarah J. Maas and not really enjoying myself with it, that says something. This book was really good. It's exactly what I needed to get back into the Throne of Glass series so that I can finish the series in the next couple months. I loved this book. I think the story is becoming very well-rounded. I think that the character development is exceptional. I absolutely love the ending of this book. I'm so looking forward to Empire of Storms, which I have on the shelf up there, and I'm looking forward to jumping in. But I am going to wait till March to do that. I'm still standing my ground that Sarah Maas loves when her characters vomit. Please tell me, am I the only person that has noticed that Sarah Maas makes everybody vomit all the time? I can't be. I cannot be. I gave this book 5 stars. I think this is the first Sarah J. Maas book that I've ever given 5 stars to, despite all the vomit. I love this book. So I will definitely keep you posted how I feel about Empire of Shadows, Empire of Storms.
One of the books that I finished this month that I gave 3 stars to, I was a little bummed out. I thought I was gonna like it a little bit more than I did. I guess I didn't realize it was YA. So that might explain why maybe the fantasy magic elements weren't as fleshed out as maybe they could have been. But overall, I did enjoy this book. I thought it was a nice story. The book is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I did think it was a cute concept. I really enjoyed the magical realism in the book. I really enjoyed the little bit of romance between our 2 characters. However, I kind of laugh at the concept of enemies to lovers in this book. Again, they're really not enemies. They're just 2 people rivaling for the same job. I think that they both kind of have like a little secret crush on each other. So I don't really think that counts as enemies to lovers, but overall, I enjoyed the book. I didn't love it. I didn't have an amazing time. I don't think I'll reread it. I do think I will read the second book, Ruthless Vows, which I do have on my bookshelf because I'm a curious girly and I need to know what's going to happen next. Yeah, it was an enjoyable book. If you like romance, if you like a bit of fantasy, if you like a little bit of magic, I would give this book 3 stars. I'm not rushing to go read Ruthless Vows. I do have it on my shelf. I'm not in any, crazy hurry to read it. I don't think it's going to be life-altering, but I am curious, so I will probably check that out, and I will see if the story gets any better, if it stays about the same, and once I do, I will report back. The next book that I read this month, I honestly wish I'd seen the Tom Cruise trigger warning before starting, is Rouge by Mona Awad. I don't have a lot good to say about this book, and I don't think that I am the right person to comment on this book because I hate Tom Cruise. Like, he freaks me out. This book should have come with a trigger warning for Tom Cruise, in my opinion. And had I known there was even one singular mention of Tom Cruise in this book,
it's definitely a no for me, dog.
I didn't know. I had no clue. And then by the time it happened, I was like kind of interested to see what was going to come of this story. I didn't love it. Let's just put it there. I probably should have DNF'd this book, but when it's horror, I love horror. I love the horror genre because sometimes you have no freaking clue what's going on in a book until the very end. So I try to give horror books the benefit of the doubt. And overall, I did like the ending. I think that the whole story had a very important underlying message about beauty and beauty standards and the way that we hold ourselves as females, but also like men have beauty standards as well. As a society, how we hold ourselves to these beauty standards that we're seeing advertised to us, that we're supposed to look this way, your skin's supposed to be this color or this tone, or all of these different things. So really, this is just basically a horror story about a very kind of tumultuous and weird relationship between a mother and daughter. The mother has passed away. This is happening in the wake of her passing, all of this story. It was okay. I gave it a 3 star, and that was being generous. Tom Cruise should have been a 1 star, but I really like Mona Awod's writing. I really like how her writing almost seems menacing. Like, as I'm reading it, I'm not comfortable. Like, I'm not having a really good time. But when you're reading a horror book, I don't know if you should be having a good time. So I think she does a good job at her overall approach to writing horror. I love her writing style. So I'm going to give it 3 stars because the writing, I think, is really strong. I think the overarching whole plot was pretty darn good too. I'm just really biased, and I really, really hate Tom Cruise, and I really wish somewhere in this it just said, hey, if you're scared of Tom Cruise, don't read this book. That's it. The next book that I read this month of February has potential to be my favorite series of all time. And that is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I've had this book on my shelf. I've had this series on my shelf for about a year now. It's been staring me down, being like, girl, it's time. It's time to read this. And then a few weeks ago, when I was out in a boat, I bought The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and super excited to read this as well. I started kind of diving into like, what's the proper order? What's a good order to read the Cosmere novels in? And most people say start with Mistborn 1 through 3. And so I did. And holy hand grenades, 5 books.
Brother Maynard, bring up the holy hand grenade.
Holy hand grenades, 5 stars, okay? This was so, so good. I honestly can't believe how much I love the main characters. I can't believe how much I love the supporting characters. There is moments in this book where your heart gets ripped out, dragged across the floor, stomped on, and then thrown in a garbage receptacle. And there are also moments in this book where you are feeling so proud, so triumphant, and just so, so happy for the main characters in this book. I am reading Mistborn Book 2. I am reading The Well of Ascension right now. It's not on my shelf, it's in my bag. I kind of told myself I would read 1 book in a series per month. However, I don't see that being the case with the Mistborn series. I could not wait to get into Book 2. I needed to know what was going to happen next. Honestly though, I read this book in like 3 days. I loved this book and cannot wait to finish The Well of Ascension and cannot wait to come back in March and talk about The Well of Ascension. And I will probably read Hero of Ages as well because I can't stop and I won't stop. I can't stop, won't stop. The next book that I listened to on audiobook and read on my iPad was Happy Place by Emily Henry. I went into this book not having any idea what it was about, just knowing that I like Emily Henry. I love her romance novels. I think she's really good at telling a feel-good story. And I requested this from my library and it came available to me on Libby on audio. So obviously I just pressed play without even looking. And I was really, really surprised to find out that this book is set in Maine. Fun fact, I live in Maine. I live about 40 minutes from the coast, which is where they are. They're in a place called Knott's Harbor, which I'm assuming is supposed to be kind of a replica of Bar Harbor. I love this. I had so much fun with this. There's one particular place in the book where they are talking about getting tattoos and they're talking about possibly getting Wicked Pissa tattoos. And I just think that it's so funny that that is included in this book because I bet if you Google Maine slang, Wicked Pizza is on there. To be fair, in my entire life of living here, I have never heard anyone, even down east, say Wicked Pizza, but I have seen bumper stickers with it on it. So it exists, it is Maine slang. It's funny the range that I can go from being like Mistborn, amazing, love this book so much, to being like Emily Henry, also love this book so much. But I love books that make me feel good. I love books that break my heart. I love books that make me feel literally anything. And that's something that I really enjoy about Emily Henry. She's very consistent in her writing. She always makes me smile. I always have a good time. I find myself kicking my feet and giggling like a little girl. And money cannot buy that. So I will continue to read Emily Henry and I will continue to read her fun little romance novels as long as she keeps putting them out because I have a really good time reading her books. So overall, I give this book a 4-star. It wasn't like amazing, amazing, amazing writing. It's Emily Henry. She's consistent. Her characters are fun. The story development's there. You really fall for the characters. You feel like you're part of the friend group. And so because of that, I'm going to give it 4 stars. I had a really good time with it. The next books that I read. I actually don't have them on my iPad anymore because I returned them. I actually read the rest of Heartstopper series. So I read book 1, did like a little blurb about it when I got it from the library earlier in this video, but I did get volume 2, 3, and 4 from Libby. And so I did read those, Heartstoppers 2, 3, and 4. So yeah, that's 4 of my 22 books right there, which are very quick reads. I love Heartstopper. It is an important story, and I really, really love our characters in Heartstopper. I didn't know how much I would really enjoy graphic novels until I really started looking at them this year and taking the time to kind of force myself to read graphic novels. I'm really glad that I did, and I just love it. I think that the representation in Heartstopper, beyond just the queer coming of age story, is amazing without even having to write it in words. Sometimes it's just in her like drawings. Something I really enjoy about graphic novels is that there is a layer of the story that you get that requires no words at all, just from looking at the visuals. And that's something that's really turned me on to graphic novels this year. So I anticipate to continue reading more and more graphic novels. And hopefully I can get my hands on Heartstopper Volume 5 for March so that I can be caught up. Heartstopper 2, 3, and 4, I gave all 4 stars to, just like I gave the first volume. I love it. I think it's a really good time, and I think it's a really nice story. The next book that I read this month, I really thought I was gonna love it, and I was so excited, and I didn't. I thought it was okay. And I hate when that happens. I hate when I like hype something up so much, and then it doesn't live up to my expectations. I feel like maybe that might be why things don't live up to my expectations, is I spend a lot of time hyping them up. But anyway, the next book that I read this month was The 7-Year Slip by Ashlie Poston. I thought it was a nice story. It was a really cute story. I love the magical realism. It just didn't do it for me. I don't know, it just didn't do it for me. I felt like I just didn't really feel a lot of connection to the characters. I do enjoy the concept of this like magical house. Just like in Divine Rivals, we have this like magical object. So I don't think I mentioned that, but in Divine Rivals, there's a magical typewriter that they type on and then send the letters through a wardrobe. Well, in this book, it's a magical house, and she ends up moving into her I think it's her aunt's house, who passed away, and her aunt has told her about the magic of this house and how sometimes all of a sudden you'll just be like 7 years in the past, right? And that's a little problematic, but whatever. And she believes her aunt, but she's never actually seen it. And every time she goes over as a kid, she just wants all this magic to happen, and it never happens. Well, cue her as an adult moving into her aunt's house. She's in her house, she's asleep one night. All of a sudden, there's this handsome southern gentleman in her house being like, "What are you doing here? I'm staying here." And they end up liking each other, getting to know each other, flirting. Then she goes out into the real world and meets him in the real world, and he's kind of a dickhead 7 years in the future, so she's not really sure what happens to him. And basically the story is like, can I stop this guy from becoming a dickhead before he becomes a dickhead? Kind of. It's not really. I'm kind of making it up as I go, because I didn't like it. But I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was cute. I thought it was a fun romance. I didn't think it was anything worth being a 4 or 5 star. I don't think I would read it again. Honestly, I'm not even really enjoying discussing it. It's the first book I've ever read by Ashlie Poston, so maybe her others are a little bit different. I don't think I'll be rushing to read another one anytime soon. I was just a little bit disappointed by The 7-Year Slip. The next book that I read this month, another iPad read, was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. So this came out, I think, this month of February, and I have only ever read Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood, and I loved it. I thought it was a really fun time. So a lot of people don't like the cover. They think it's giving like very passionate about graphic design. I kind of agree, although I don't hate the cover. I didn't buy the book though, because I don't think it's something I want on my shelf. But overall, I had a really fun time with Bride, and I would love to read more stories set in the same kind of universe as Bride. I know this is technically a standalone, but I really enjoyed the universe that Ali Hazelwood was able to create. I will out myself as not having known what the Omegaverse was. And so I had to do some Googling throughout the book. I had never heard of the term nodding. I didn't know what that was, so I had to Google it. Okay? So I went down a rabbit hole, learned a lot about the biology of werewolves and how they reproduce, learned a lot about alphas and omegas and betas, learned a lot about the way of the wolf, okay? And once I was able to wrap my head around all of that, I really enjoyed the book. I had a really fun time. I think Ali Hazelwood always does a really good job of writing her characters in a way that make you like them from the jump. You are interested in them. You feel like you've already been following along in their story, if that makes sense, from the jump. And for me, that's something that makes Ali Hazelwood a really good and a really consistent romance writer. I say that as I admit I've only read 2 of her books, but from my experience reading these 2 books, it's a really fun time. I don't know, there's just something about the way that she writes her characters that as soon as you jump in the story, like page 1, you feel like you've been besties and you know this character and you've been hanging out with them for like the last 2 years. And I like that. I like when you can immediately get into a groove with a character. In a romance novel, in a fun, quick kind of story like that, I really like when the reading comes easy and naturally and it just kind of vibes really well. And that is something that I experience with Ali Hazelwood consistently. So I think I'm going to read Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood next, and maybe even Check and Mate. Bride, as a whole, like I said, overall 4 stars. It was a really good reading experience, and I definitely recommend it, especially if you like Ali Hazelwood, especially if you like romance, and especially if you like fantasy and the Omegaverse. This might be for you. The last book that I read this month was the illustrated edition of Game of Thrones Book 1. So I've had the illustrated edition of this book sitting on my shelf for so long that it actually moved house with me, and it actually got put into a container with a saw. I don't know how that happened. And so I messed up the book, and that kind of bums me out. But I really wanted to do a Game of Thrones reread, especially lately. I've been feeling like rewatching the show, and I don't want to because the show ended in such a terribly disrespectful and awful way that I decided instead to reread the series as a kind of jog my memory of what's real and what's HBO nonsense. So this is the beginning of my Game of Thrones reread. My hope is to get through the series this year. And who knows, maybe George R.R. Martin will stop farting around and at least give us a date for the next book.
Come on out of there, honey. Quit farting around.
Maybe. Probably not. But of course, Game of Thrones, always a 5-star read. There's not much that I can say about this book that hasn't already been said. Absolutely love it. I definitely won't be buying the other illustrated editions. I'm probably just going to reread the books that I already have on my shelf because I also need to stop buying books. That's a whole other video for a whole other day though. So yeah. Oh my goodness, I almost forgot. I almost forgot that I read The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. It's not Albom, it's Album. And you know how I know that? Because I listened to this book while I was reading it, and the author is the one who narrates it. And he says, by Mitch Albom. Could have fooled me my entire adult life. I've been saying Mitch Albom, like the L is silent. Well, that's a lie. So I read The Little Liar for a book club that I recently just joined. Some girlies and I in my area decided to get together, do a monthly book club, excuse me. And so we did. And this is a Holocaust historical fiction novel written by Mitch Albom, who, I don't know if you've ever read Mitch Albom. He has a very distinctive style of writing. Quite a few of the girls in my book club had actually never read Mitch Albom before. So they were kind of, I don't want to say offended. They were a little frustrated by how succinct and how terse sometimes Mitch Albom is. I think that one thing, in my opinion, I feel about Mitch Albom is that he doesn't write stories for you to get super duper connected to the main characters or any of the characters for that matter. The characters in Mitch Albom's stories are solely there as a vessel, as a prop, if you will, to tell the overarching story and discuss the overarching themes. And I think that that's something about Mitch Albom that I learned early on in my undergrad was that not a lot of time to get super attached to characters because the characters aren't necessarily there for you to get to know on a bestie basis. The characters are there as a lesson, like I said, as a vessel to tell a story. And I love that about Mitch Albom, but it definitely caused some mixed reviews in my book club with this. So I gave this book a 4 stars solidly, maybe even 4.5. I really enjoyed this. I absolutely loved this. This book was all about the power of lies and deception and what that can do to people internally themselves and to people externally around you when you lie. I really liked it. I definitely cannot wait to recommend this. I have a few friends who will definitely like this book. So solid 4 stars, maybe even 4.5 stars for me. Mitch Albom always seems to do that for me. He just has a way that I really connect with as a reader. So yeah, this is officially the last book that I read this month. My tripod is always like blowing in the wind. So that concludes my February wrap up. I do plan to come back at the beginning of April with a March wrap up. My hope is to also do at least 2 videos during the month of March that are not wrap up videos. I want to continue to grow my booktube channel, and I think the best way to do that is to kind of speed up the pace at which I'm creating videos. So I'm hoping that at least 2 videos in the month of March in addition to this one. So I do hope that you'll like, I hope you'll subscribe, and I hope you'll stick around because I am so looking forward to being a part of booktube, and I hope to see you on the next video. Bye!